There are many stories in the watch world: barn finds, stolen grails, military mysteries, but nothing compares to the legend of a Rolex that vanished without a trace and then reappeared decades later under circumstances no one could explain. Collectors call it the returning Rolex. But the truth is far more unsettling. It begins in 1974. Part 1: The Gift Mask. In a quiet London suburb lived a man named Edward Mallory, a modest schoolteacher with one peculiar passion. He collected vintage dive watches. Not for status, not for investment, but because he believed that every watch carried a story, a memory trapped in gears, as he often said. For his 40th birthday, his wife Helena surprised him with something extraordinary: a Rolex Submariner 5513 with a gilt dial, perfect patina, and a matching bracelet. But something about the watch felt unusual. Inside the caseback were engravings that didn't belong. 2 sets of initials and a date from nearly 20 years earlier, 1956. The watchmaker who previously serviced it shrugged. Could be a military issue, could be a private gift, hard to say. Edward didn't dwell on it. He wore the watch daily, treating it gently but proudly, believing it would one day become a cherished family heirloom. He had no idea how right and how wrong he was. Part 2: The Night It Disappeared. On February 17, 1976, Edward returned home from work, placed the Rolex on his nightstand like he did every evening, and went downstairs for dinner. When he came back up an hour later, the watch was gone. No break-in, no damage, no signs of theft. The window was shut, the door locked. Only one object had vanished: his Submariner. The police couldn't find fingerprints or evidence. Neighbors saw nothing. No pawnshop ever reported it. It was as if the watch had evaporated from his home. Edward blamed himself, then blamed fate, then blamed whoever had owned it before him. For years, he wondered if the watch carried some hidden history, some past its previous owner didn't want discovered. But time passed, life moved on. The Rolex disappeared into myth. Part 3: The Letter. Fast forward 28 years. Edward was retired now, older, slower, and less interested in collecting than he once was. He rarely thought about the missing Rolex anymore, until one morning in 2004, when a plain white envelope arrived in his mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single line typed on thin paper: "I believe this belongs to you." And wrapped carefully in cloth was the Rolex Submariner 5513. Same patina, same bracelet, same faint scratch across the bezel at 18 minutes. Except for one thing. Inside the caseback was now an additional engraving, a 3rd set of initials and another date. 1992. Edward's hands trembled. The watch had been somewhere with someone for nearly 3 decades. But who? Why return it? And why anonymously? Part 4: The Research. Edward's curiosity turned into obsession. He began researching the 3 owners implied by the engravings. 1956, HR, likely the original owner. Military records showed 2 Royal Navy divers with those initials. 1974, EM, his wife's engraved dedication. 1992, JT, the unknown one. After weeks of digging, he found one match: Jonathan Talbot, a deep-sea recovery specialist who died in a diving accident in 1993. Edward's heart raced as he pieced together the timeline. If this man had the watch, how did he get it? Where did he find it? And why would someone return it now after all these years? He contacted Talbot's surviving cousin, who reluctantly agreed to speak. What she said changed everything. Part 5: The Diver's Notebook. Jonathan Talbot kept a private dive journal. In his final entry, dated 1992, he mentioned finding a gilt dial sub inside a sunken cargo container while on a recovery mission north of Malta. The journal described the container as not openly marked, military in design, filled with uniforms and personal effects. Among those effects was a man's duffel bag containing old letters, a rusted compass, a photograph of a diver team, and the Rolex. Talbot wrote, "The watch shouldn't be here. Something feels wrong about it, but I can't explain why." He intended to trace its original owner, but died only months later. After that, the Rolex disappeared again, until 2004. Part 6: The Call That Never Came. Edward reported the return to his local police station, but they dismissed it, calling it a sentimental curiosity, not a crime. Experts examined the watch and confirmed it was the same watch, untouched movement, same serial, engraving added by hand sometime around the early 90s. But no fingerprints, no clues, no trail. Edward hoped the anonymous person who returned it would eventually reveal themselves. They never did. Part 7. A final twist. In 2007, 3 years after receiving the watch, Edward received another letter, this time with no object inside. Just a message. The watch was never meant to be lost. Take care of it. Its story is still unfinished. No signature, no explanation. But the envelope contained one more thing, a photocopy of a 1956 Navy diver team photograph, the same photo mentioned in Talbot's journal. There, among the divers, was a man wearing a Rolex Submariner. On the back of the photo was a name, Captain Henry Ross, HR, the original owner, a diver who records show disappeared during a classified salvage mission in the Mediterranean in 1956. His body was never recovered, his equipment was never found, until Talbot somehow discovered that container in 1992. Part 8, the theory. Collectors, historians, and conspiracy theorists have tried to make sense of the chain of events. 1956, Captain Ross disappears during a classified mission. His belongings, including the Rolex, end up underwater sealed in a container. 1974, somehow the Rolex surfaces in London and is sold to Helena. No record of how. 1976, it vanishes from Edward's home, cleanly, surgically, without theft signs. 1992, it resurfaces during an underwater salvage operation by Jonathan Talbot. 1993, Talbot dies. The watch disappears again. 2004, the watch returns to Edward anonymously. 2007, a final letter arrives, tying everything together, except the ending. Someone was tracking the watch for decades. Someone who knew its history. Someone who believed it must return to its rightful owner. But who and why? Edward never found the answer. He kept the watch safe until his death in 2016. And after that, no one knows where the Rolex went next. Epilogue: the watch's legacy. Today, the watch community still debates the story of Edward's Submariner. Some believe the military intervened. Some believe Talbot's crew tracked down the original owner's family. Some believe the watch itself was part of a mission still classified today. But most agree on one thing: a Rolex may tell time, but this one seems to move through it. It vanished without a trace, came back from the deep, disappeared again, returned twice, and somewhere, right now, it might be ticking on the wrist of its next chosen owner. Because the Rolex that went missing and returned years later isn't done telling its story. Not yet.